Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another Friday night hangout. Tonight we're going to be talking about conceptual sculpting. So, if you haven't hung out with me before, welcome to the channel and welcome to the live stream. I'll be here for the next couple of hours, kind of talking about my process and just hanging out with you guys. So if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to jump in and talk to you guys about what's going on. And remember that the streams are Fridays at 7 to 9 p.m. It's in the banner for the channel if you don't remember where that is. Yeah, so I'm always here to talk to you guys and hang out. All right, so let's go over to Photoshop. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept we're working on tonight. So if we go full screen, you can kind of see the dragon concept that we're working on. So this is something that I'm doing for a project for my studio that I'm working with and partnering with. And we went out to Vegas about April sometime for NAB, and we shot something while we were out there in the desert. So we wanted to create something that was sort of a desert dragon type creature for the VFX in this project, and that's what I've been tasked to do. So tonight I'm getting into a little bit of the 3D conceptual process for this dragon. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I would approach going about this, and a little bit of background on me. I'm a seasoned 3D artist, production artist, and also a conceptual designer, but I'm kind of new to ZBrush. So I would label myself a basic to intermediate user, but tonight you're going to see kind of what that looks like, because I do most of my work in Blender usually. So this is what we're going to be working on. Copy. Okay, so, and what I want to do is kind of get it full screen, behind the viewport, so we can keep it back there while it's out of the way. So I'm going to go to the initialize section down here. All right, so edit this, start as its pose to help me with this. Here we go. Something kind of like that. That way, we're not going to be editing this. We're going to be editing the Z-sphere. You can also just flatten the image plane down onto the canvas. So once we get it to where we want it, so if we instead go ahead and jump into another tool here, jump into a sphere 3D, draw this out. Now, if we hit T, our background's going to stay where it is, and we're going to be able to kind of sculpt on just this sphere. So what I actually want to use is a Z-sphere, though. Okay, so just getting started with the concept, there's a lot of ways we go about doing this. You could start with a head and then add the body later, or you could start with sort of the snake-like body, get that in place, figuring out how that's going to be laid out, and then add the arms and all that kind of stuff, and then go back and refine different pieces of the head and everything as you go. So it really just depends on how you want to work. In this case tonight, I want to block in kind of the whole body. So what I'm going to do is use the Z-spheres to help me with that. So I'm going to start. Let's turn on our floor here. And I want to use this to kind of get this in perspective here. And if we turn on X symmetry, we can see which side is which is going to be good. But in this case, we're just going to want to go start by going straight down the middle. So I'm going to turn that back off so we know which is which. Now we'll just start from this side here. And let's kind of mimic what's going on here. Now, I have this sort of in a 3/4 view here for the sketch. I've also got a version of this that's saved with a model sheet. So if we would rather use that, I can go ahead and pull that up. So where would that be? I think it's under streaming. Yeah. So this is sort of a model sheet that we put together in another one of my live streams for the dragon. So if we would rather kind of do this, this would be another thing we could do. So it really just depends on what you're more comfortable working with. Yeah, why not? Let's use that instead. I think it'll be a little easier to go about doing this. So let's hit T, clear the plane in the background, and then let's load up another texture. Okay, so since we just did this, it should be rather easy to do it again. At least that's the idea, hopefully. So let's pull this up. All right. Okay, so that's now in place. Once again, let us pull this back into the Z space a little bit. Use transpose to do that. And I want to go back far enough that we're not going to be intersecting with any of the models that we're working on. And then I can just scale this up quite a bit. So that origin, as you can see right here in the middle, is kind of where our world is. And again, we're just pulling that back off of that so that our model doesn't accidentally collide. Because you will see it go behind this image plane, which is really not what I want in this case. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this up pretty much full screen here. Okay, I'm gonna hit T to disable. So now we've just got this locked onto the canvas now. And now when we switch to our Z sphere again, draw this out, everything will stay in place. There we go. And now hopefully we won't ever get in a position where you can see the ground plane is definitely colliding with the background. So we've hopefully moved it over far enough that that won't collide with anything that we do. So. Okay, let's start building this thing out. This is actually a top view. So I'm going to start in the very tip of the dragon's head here. Actually, let's start about here because you're really supposed to start at the origin. So I'm going to start where the wings typically are, and then I'm going to kind of model from there. So pull this out. We'll use Control to pull that out further, and then position this over here. Do another pull out from the end over here. Get that lined up. And then we'll just kind of continue this down the rest of the body. So okay, get those in place. Now let's go back over to the side. And because the image plane is still part of the canvas and it's not just the background, if you try to click on this, it will actually try to add the Z sphere to the background. So make sure you're clicking off in the side over here for that. So let's snap to maybe the front, and then we'll go to the side over here. Okay. Okay, so now let's switch to the move tool and let's flatten these out. Okay. So this one I want to scale up a little bit. So let's grab that and scale. And we might add another one in here. Hit Q to go back to draw, throw another one of those in there, and then let's scale this one down. Okay. So that's kind of the basic spine and head in place. Have to remember not to move this around or zoom in and out because we're trying to line this up with the model sheet for now. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and add in another subtool, and I'm going to append a new Z-sphere. And let's move this around. Looks like looks like ZBrush just crashed. Interesting. Okay. Wow. Was not expecting that. Well, we'll start it back up and we'll try this again. Let's see if Lightbox has anything for us. Yeah, probably not. All right, so let's do this again. Sorry about that, guys. All right, texture, which plane load? Okay. Lock that into place. Add in a Z-sphere. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and draw, let's draw the arms first this time. So I'm gonna scale this down, move this. Start over here, pull this out. Start over here, pull another one out. And I'm just gonna go back and work on the scale after the fact. Okay, so let's hit E. I want to grab on the ball itself, not the arm, because that's not going to scale the right way. Okay, I'm not going to be able to do this unless I can get it a little closer here. So this one got a little too small on me. So let's go back to draw. Let's get rid of that one and add another one in there. Just for safety, I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, let's drop the sizing in. Line this back up. Start by getting that first joint kind of repositioned back in the right place. And then we'll kind of line the rest of these up. Okay, so let's now switch over to the front view, and to do that, we're going to have to make sure, again, we click off the canvas here as we rotate this around. And let's move this one down so it's kind of straight across. There we go. Okay, so now that one's in place. We can go ahead and add in a new Z-sphere again. It's going to put it right in the middle, which is where we want it. Now we can go ahead and draw this back out. Sorry, we gotta click on the right Z tool or that's not gonna work. Okay. Let's pull this one out over here. Scale this one up. Make sure I make that a little bit bigger. There we go, something kind of like that. And let's put another one in here. Make that one a little bit bigger as well. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Just in case we get another crash. All right, there we go. Go ahead and start by pulling this one way down here. And shrink that down. All right, that should be a little easier to put the rest of these joints in. So just click there and there. And then we're going to want to make sure these line up in perspective. So this is a sort of a side view here. So I'm just going to rotate these sort of joints down as we get down here. Clicking in the middle will kind of let you rotate these from the middle of the bones, like you would an FK joint. The only difference is rather than being in a regular animation program where everything's connected with a hierarchy, here you're going to have to still rotate each of the individual bones. So just be aware of that. Okay, so it's about as straight as we need things to be. Let's kind of get everything lined back up here. And then I'm going to save another version. Okay, so now what I want to do is get copies of all the arms kind of in place. I'm not entirely sure if that's super necessary right now because we could probably just come back and once we've got a base sculpt in place, reposition all the arms and get those where they need to be. There's a lot of arms, and so yeah, I just want to kind of think that through because what I would typically do in a situation like this is just make copies since they're all pretty much the same thing and instance those so we would save memory and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not particularly sure how I would do that in ZBrush right now without making individual copies with all the subtools, and that would be a lot to deal with. So let's just start by making a copy on the other side and we'll kind of go from there. So we'll grab this subtool up top, jump into the geometry. And first thing I want to do is actually mirror this over. So go to deformation, mirror on the x-axis, and then under geometry, we'll go to, I think it's under mirror and weld, mirror and welds. Like I said, guys, sort of new to ZBrush, so looking for the mirror and weld tool. Topology? No. All right, give me 1 second, guys. I don't remember what submenu this is under, so that's what I'm looking up. Geometry. Dynamic subdivision. Maybe it's not showing up for the Z-spheres. One of those nights, feel like I'm going kind of crazy. Haven't tried this with a Z-sphere before, but it should work. I would think. All right, let's try it another way. Let's just duplicate the subtool. And once we have that, we can just mirror this on the other side. That will probably do the same thing. Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right, so once again, because I'm getting a little paranoid now, I'm gonna go ahead and save this again. Let's rotate around, make sure we're happy with this. I think I am. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and clear my canvas, and then I'm going to pull out another instance of my mesh here. So now we're just editing this dragon. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around, kind of reorient this a little bit. Okay. So now that we have that in place, we can go ahead and kind of preview what this is going to look like. Hitting A. It's, of course, going to do it on the subtool that we have selected. So what we can do now is, just for practice tonight, I'm going to go ahead and merge all of these. So let's go down a little bit. And let's go to... pick which one of these we want to use, and yeah, all right, so we'll merge after we remesh. Okay. Let's turn those off. Okay. Let's make it a polymesh 3D. And let's turn on X symmetry. And there we go. All right, now we can start dynameshing. So let's pull up the draw size. Start by smoothing this out. All right, I'm gonna pull my Photoshop up on the other side so I can see kind of what I'm working on here. And okay, let's go a little bit lower resolution to start off with. And I'm just gonna concern myself with getting the base shapes in place. I'm gonna switch over to clay buildup. Zoom in on a section here. Let's play with okay, so I'm gonna start by not worrying about the sort of spikes and stuff on the side. For the most part, it's gonna be a pretty simple shape all the way down. And what we're gonna need to kind of focus on is, we'll start with the belly down here and we'll kind of flatten this out. So let's grab a planer. Let's see if this works. Okay, it's not really what I want. Maybe more of a polish. Yeah, that's better. So we're gonna end up rounding this back out a little bit, but for now we need it to be a little bit flatter than the top. So it's pretty good. Still wanna kind of smooth this as we go down. Sides are still going to be rather smooth, but that's a good start. And let's do a Damien standard. Kind of get in here and play with what needs to have these sort of ridges all the way down, stuff like that. Inflate a little bit. Okay, so let's grab a big chunk of this here. here. Okay, something like that. Bit more of a curved head there. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of wobble and some details to the rest of the body here. These are all gonna get covered up on the outside with sort of an exoskeleton of spikes that we'll have to create as we get going here, but that is to come later. Block up the musculature around one of these arms here. Let's grab and inflate and kind of play with these. So each of these arms is going to have about 4 joints, not about 4 joints, and we're going to need to kind of define those here. For now, I just want to kind of imply some of that detail. And we'll have to go in further, and once we have more geometry, we'll get in here and kind of play a little bit with that. But let's just keep kind of implying some detail back in here. Actually trying out a new tablet, which is not a Wacom, it is a Huion. That's how you say that. And I'm liking it a lot. It's got a lot more sensitivity to it. And I've been using a couple of different versions of the Wacom tablets, but this one was a lot cheaper, and I think it's going to be a good addition to the arsenal. All right, let's up-res. So the main thing I'm doing now is kind of making sure all the big shapes are in place. Eye sockets are one of those things I'm looking at right now. Making sure that structural anatomy is kind of where it needs to be to make this thing look the way the concept art looks. Okay. Pull some of these jowls off over here. Also over here. Kind of a ridge here for where the upper cheek meets with the eye. It's hard to ignore the horns at this stage because they're such a prominent feature of the dragon, but it's kind of important to do that since those are going to be separate parts of the mesh. Okay, so as far as the back goes, again, since we're covering most of this up with details and the scales and spikes and stuff like that, horns, all that kind of stuff, what I'm trying to do is get the underlying mesh kind of uneven, and that way, starting from the center of the spine as it curves around to the outside, we're getting sort of a bumpiness, hills and valleys. And that way the spine is going to be kind of offsetting those horns in a way that creates a little bit of an undulation. And so don't want it to be super disturbing, noisy, but I do want it to be a little bit rocky underneath that because there would be a little bit of tension there from where they're connecting to the subdermis of the skin. All of this under here will probably change, but just so I kind of remember what I'm doing, I'm adding in some of these little ridges for the stomach area. Okay, so before we get too far along here, let's double check all of our proportions and make sure we're not getting anything too out of whack here. a nice even flow from the head all the way down to the tail with that the width and the taper of the body. So just gently smoothing some of this back in. Okay, a little off axis here, so. Okay, so let's save again. Okay, so I'm gonna look down and see if there's any other features in terms of big features that we need to add to the rest of this level of detail. We've got some change in the way that things are constructed from about this point down on the body. There are overlapping layers of plates. So if we're looking at kind of how that works, I want to make sure I'm not coming up too high off of the flatten. I don't want to be coming up too high off of the surface because they need to be kind of surface level for this to work, but they're basically overlapping plates. So I might start by blocking this end here. And of course, we'll build these as separate meshes when we actually get to modeling these or sculpting the finer details. But for now, we just want to kind of indicate what's going on here. So go back with each of these with a flatten. Okay. So I'm going to use the same sort of level of detail frequency up here at the top here for this section of the body. So I'll switch back into clay buildup and we'll kind of keep this going as far as this pattern of irregularity goes. Add some contrast by digging in right next to these ridges that are kind of jutting out from the sides. And then we'll go back with a gentle smooth, kind of knock some of this back down in there. That'll give us the same basic appearance as up top. What I like about this stage is that we're really just conceptually trying to nail the look in 3D. So we're not having to worry so much about, you know, perfection and detail and all of that. If we can get the basic, you know, silhouette and all of that nailed, then it should be an easier process to come back and clean this up later and do our final sculpt on top of this. But this is kind of just for getting everybody on the same page, making sure that we're seeing in 3D what we all think we're seeing when we're looking at like a two-dimensional sketch. Okay. right, so I think for the most part, that's pretty good. I might want to knock down some of the width up top. I want this to kind of look a little skinnier overall, so I'm gonna, I don't know if we have a deflate. No, we just have an inflate. So I'm gonna use the inverse of this to kind of pull this back in. And of course, we're going to lose a little bit of detail as we go, but I want this to be a little bit more subtle as we get in here. So I'm going to bring that Z intensity down. I'm just going to massage this kind of back into place. Subtle smoothing as we get further down the body. So I'm not going to totally wipe away what we've done on the bottom, but yeah, we're definitely losing a little bit there. This thing is supposed to be pretty big. I didn't actually show a human model in terms of scale, but it's pretty big. I think we said on the model sheet it was about 19 heads high, so it's a lot. Two and a half people tall, maybe, something like that. Okay. So the only other areas on the body which kind of need to have higher resolution detail at this point are the arms, the head, and possibly some of the areas on the bottom that are going to be exposed. So we need to probably get to a point pretty quickly where we're moving on from what we're doing here. Again, I'm looking for that consistency in the overall size here. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just kind of needs to be on a level that would feel organic. So if it's not feeling that way, we got some more to do. So here we're getting collapsed in the middle, which tells me I need to kind of inflate this area a little more so that we're sculpting correctly. You can also turn off the back faces while you're sculpting on those areas so that you're not going to get them too collapsed in on itself. Just so we're not losing the end of this tail, I'm gonna buff that up a little bit, and I think that's gonna be good. Okay. Save that. And let's do another zero mesh at 128. So you can see how small I started at 32, and then only now that we're kind of at our third pass for the mesh are we getting into a level of 128, which is still fairly low. So let's work on these arms a little bit. Okay, so there's 4 main sections to these arms. They're going to start off pretty big and bulky over on the side. Pull this back up to about 6. There we go. And each of these joints is going to have a section where they kind of telescope down and smaller and smaller and smaller. So what we're going to want it to do is probably pick where the joints are first. So I'm going to do a little bit of an inflate where we want this to kind of end. I'm going to do a little bit of a deflate right after, smooth that out. So maybe about here, kind of fade that in. And then same thing here. This last one isn't a, well, this is a joint here, but this is actually going to be a claw on the end. So I'm going to want to kind of flatten this down to pretty thin area. Now we don't want to get it so condensed that, again, they're kind of on top of each other. That's bad. So we're going to have to carefully taper that down, but that's what we want to have right there. And now we can go in and kind of work on these joints a little bit more. So consistency is going to be the key here, and for that you just have to have a little bit of patience and a little bit of a steady hand to get these kind of locked into place, and it's just a little bit of finessing as you go. So want the tops to be sort of coming in as well, so this whole thing should taper down. So we'll do the top sides as well. Just like that. And I'm using a very light touch on the smooth operations. Okay, now to really get these sort of popping on the joints, we're going to need to do a crease, and we'll use the Damien standard for that. Make sure we're getting both sides here. This is mirrored over the other axis, so we'll have the other arm sort of emerging the same way, but we're going to want to make sure we're not missing the tops and the backs of these joints. Okay. Damien standard, and let's play with these joints a little bit. So I'm just going to rotate around, follow this line. Correct any areas as we go, do a little bit of smoothing, and that's really all we need. So it's just a tug of war of the Damien standard creasing and a little bit of smoothing as we get in here. You don't want to do too much creasing without a little bit of smooth, because you're going to run the risk again of getting areas that are kind of collapsing in on themselves, and that's not good. So we may even come back and do a little bit of an inflate after we have played a little bit with the way those are shaping up. But for now, at this resolution, that's about what we're going to get. Okay, so check the other one, make sure X symmetry is still working the way it should, and we should be good. Okay. play a little bit with crease. We have crease by itself. Maybe pinch is what I'm looking for. Terminology between Blender and ZBrush is a little different. So these joints where we added that crease, we'll go back in and pinch up, and we'll do the same thing on both sides. And this will be easier once we have more geometry to deal with, more edge loops. But for now, yeah, we'll work with what we got. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on bringing these center creases together first, nudging those into place, and then we can focus on getting the ridges in place when we have more geometry to work with, maybe on the next level of Dynamesh. I'm going to do this a little bit. Pull the draw size down. Okay. So for now, that's about it. All we're going to get on these. So let's switch over to another view here. Hey, looks like we got somebody in the chat. What's up? How you doing? So tonight I am creating a concept for a dragon. Trying to get everything to come back. There we go. So let me pull this over so you can see it. This is the dragon we're kind of creating in ZBrush. So working on a little bit of a concept piece, and then we're going to go back in another stream and kind of work up some of the details, but we're going to get it to a point where it's kind of stretched out tonight so that it is following this model sheet and kind of in place for this pose. And that's what I'm doing now. Thanks for popping in and saying hi. Okay, so let's just focus on the areas that need the most attention right now. So we did the arm work over. We're going to do the head next, and then we're going to work on the under part of the body and kind of get that prepped before we start playing a little bit with some of the more detailing or some of the subtools for the spikes and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so I'm going to mask off just the head here. Let's see. Hey, what's up? Glad you're in the chat. Thanks for saying hi. How you doing tonight? We are working on a conceptual concept sculpt for a dragon. All right, so I'm gonna get in here and play a little bit more with some of these features. We were waiting to clean up some of the nose cavities and stuff like that until we had a higher res to work with. Now that we have that, we can kind of start playing with this a little bit more. So I'm gonna just quickly get in here and pull these up into place. So we've got a bit of a bird beak sort of thing going on with the way that this is kind of tucking, and it's a little hard to tell from the concept art, but basically this is coming out kind of like this, and then we're going to have an sort of underbite, I guess is what you'd say, for the way this is shaping up. And let's do a little bit of a crease here. So have you guys been using ZBrush long, or you just getting into it, or what's going on? Okay. So I don't know if I'm gonna get your name right, but Isuther is what I'm seeing in the chat. Let me know if I need to say that some other way. See that you've been doing it 3D for a year and a half. Started with Element 3D and maybe working on some other stuff now. So I've used Element 3D, love it. It's a great plugin from the likes of Andrew Kramer. The Emerga, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm a Blender guy myself, so you are in good company, my friends. Okay, let's see. There's a lot of intricacy happening with the way this is shaped, and I want to make sure I'm capturing, again, the base forms before I get in and just go to town. So I'm actually gonna pull this up to the next level. Mesh must be fully visible in order to Dynamesh. There we go. So you discovered Houdini and then discovered ZBrush. Do I have an art station? Yes, I do have an art station. Just search for Brandon Hicks, H-I-X. And I've got a few of my projects up there, and I'll soon be uploading some more. I'm currently working on a new course for Blender, and if you haven't seen what I'm working on yet, I can share that real fast. But it's going to be a sweet course. So I have a website at theorangeguild.com, which is where I show, it's my training platform for all my Blender stuff. And let's see, where is it? There it is. See if I've got a test render I can share. All right. So this is kind of what I've been working on lately, and there's a lot of the live streams up on this channel if you want to see the process for this. I'm going to open this up in Photoshop because it'll look better. So yeah, a lot of work on, everything's custom, so a lot of shader work and texturing, sculpting, yeah. So yeah, definitely share what you're working on, man. I'd love to see it. If you're interested in getting some hands-on critiques, check out the memberships for the Orange Guild. It's only $10 a month, $9 a month actually, and I'll do a little bit of mentorship and critique for you guys. if you're into that sort of thing. So happy to kind of provide that as part of our service. Kerrigan likeness from StarCraft. Very cool. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in some eyeballs. So let's append Sphere 3D. Sure, this is hidden somewhere. I'm also streaming on YouTube, so if you want to pop over, search Brandon Hicks on YouTube, and I'm streaming live there too. So if you want to paste the link in there, in the chat or in the comments, I'll be happy to take a look and let you know what I think. Okay, that's probably good. Let's duplicate this one and do a mirror. Just gonna your website, the Gibson has a real piece of art. Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. I actually did that for my dad for a Christmas present. He's a huge guitar fan. He wanted a custom guitar, and so I decided to make him one in Blender. But yeah, that one's in my reel. I'm pretty proud of that one. Okay, I don't want mirror and weld now. I want mirror. Oh, okay, links are removed on YouTube as well. So sorry about that. I'll look into that and see what I can do there. But if you want to, you can go to my ArtStation and reach out through email, and I'll be happy to kind of take a look from that as well. And I should be able to get that. So yeah. Emails shouldn't be blocked, but anyways, yeah, you have a good evening too. Glad to see you in the chat. Okay, there we go. Got our eyeballs in place. Let's now start working on the eye sockets. Okay, so this is going to kind of recede back into here. Okay, I need to reposition these here. So I'm going to use the transpose, hold control. Oops, not what I wanted to do. Let's drag out new version. To change the angle a little bit of these little, I don't know what these are, things on his face. So use transpose holds control to create a mask that sort of goes off of the normal of an area. Just want it to be right about here. Okay, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be to do that. So let's go back to standard. Okay. Okay, now we can do transpose and hold Alt. Something like that. And get to the right angle here. Should be doable. Okay, so let's go back into transpose, hold Alt, and I want to rotate these in. There we go. Okay, yeah, that's better. This is actually going to need to come up quite a bit. So I'm going to smooth this back in to the face. Pull this up a bit. And that's more accurate. Okay, so most of this is in place kind of where we would want it up till this point. Some little things like ridges on the nose, you can kind of hint at right now. Again, we're kind of too low res to be putting those levels of detail in, but it's all about implying at this point. So got some kind of oriental looking pieces that are added to the backside here, and this would be more like feathers on a bird, but they're coming off to create sort of a mask type silhouette on the side of the cheekbones here. So what I'm going to do is build up an entire area and then knock that back into the cheekbone in alignment with that, and then we can cut in those sort of fiery edges. We'll do that with the Damien standard. So again, we just want to imply at this point, so I'm going to put 2 or 3 of these in right here, just to hint that that's kind of what's happening, and then we'll add a lot more high frequency detail when we get to that phase of the process. So kind of see what that does there. Yeah, so from the front you can kind of see what that adds. So this is a weird hybrid of an oriental and sort of a medieval type dragon. It has wings like a medieval dragon, but the facial structure is definitely more snake-like oriental in the way that it's shaped. I really wanted to have some unique things going on with this version of the model, so I was careful to reference, lots of different things and see if I could find a way to kind of make a hybrid that was interesting. But the trick now is finding a way for this to work in 3D, because going from paper two-dimensional drawing, where it may seem difficult to get it down, is a lot easier sometimes than it is to actually turn that into a 3-dimensional form in a program like this. So it's important to make sure you're working out those problems that you're sculpting, get those things kind of solved, and then work that out. So one of the things we need to kind of focus on is the way that this is shaped here. The eye is not going to be like a human eye. It's going to be more snake-like in nature. So it's going to be a bit more oblong in the way that it's shaped. And also it's going to slant with the eye socket. So we're going to need to build that in at this stage pretty carefully. And I want it to look, evil. That was the whole idea behind going with this direction, was trying to find a way to create something that really came across as natural and evil. I guess it's more unnatural than natural, but we wanted something that you could just see from the eyes was intent on hurting you. So our main character has a really solid antagonist to deal with. It's a little better. I'm going to switch over to the grab tool, or not the grab tool, the move tool, and work a little bit more on those eye sockets. So I might move the slant factor up a little bit. Narrow the inset of where these are in the head, and then reposition kind of how those are folding around the orbs, like that. And then bunch this area up a little bit more, and that'll make it feel a little bit more sinister. Smooth that out a little bit so we don't have any pinching problems. Okay, I'm going to pull this area back in here. So I'm going to flatten this area a little bit more because we're going to be adding some insert brushes on that surface. Smooth this out a little bit. Very lightly brushing the tablet right now just to get a very simple smooth. It's a little too much. Pull that back. Okay, so before I jump into any of that stuff, I'm going to do one more pass on the arms and get those joints kind of looking a little bit better. Okay, so at this point, we can kind of start thinking about what's going to be showing for the surface of the anatomy. Of course, we need to kind of always be thinking about that, but at this point, since we're getting higher into those levels of subdivision for the Dynamesh, we want to be thinking about how that's going to end up appearing on the surface. So basically, have a big joint here, a joint here, joint here, and a joint here. Now, since we're working with sort of an exoskeleton, the joints are going to be pretty visible, but again, this is a perfect opportunity to showcase any muscular structure underneath the surface of the skin, just a little bit of subtle build up, and then subsequent smoothing will kind of show off those forms. And then you can contrast that by keeping the areas around those other areas of forms pretty smooth, and that way you've got some contrast happening. So let's go back in here on this first joint and kind of work on the way this looks. So I'm going to build up this edge right around the first part of this joint. I'm going to blend over to this edge so that it's kind of jutting out like this. And I'm going to leave the edge pretty well untouched with the smooth operation. And then everything back over here is going to get kind of tapered off to the same height, if that makes sense. just like that. So what we end up with is a pretty pronounced separation in the height from this first bigger joint to the next joint, which shows that kind of telescoping method for the way they kind of fold and work and stuff like that. So we would have like a pretty hard shell exterior maybe, and then inside we'd have some softer tissue, and then we'd have another joint here that would be built up and have sort of a shell. So we do the same thing on this side. Build up an edge with clay buildup, and then just hold shift and smooth a little bit to the right of it. And then we just have a tiny separation in the height, which is all you really need. Okay. So we'll do the same sort of thing on this side. This one I'm really going to knock down because it's getting a little fat before we lead up to that edge. So I'm going to smooth all that back down. Drop our size, and let's kind of indent this in a little bit. Making sure these details are the right proportions and all that kind of stuff. All right. So the other thing we haven't added yet is the wings, which we could do at this point. But I think I'm going to wait till I get the rest of the body in place because the wing anatomy will have to start somewhere in here. And I want to make sure that the rest of the spikes and everything are kind of in place before I figure out what I'm going to do with that. So we might put some indication in of where those joints start, and that way we can kind of work around them. But other than that, definitely don't want to be doing too much. So let's look at the model sheet and see kind of where that's supposed to start. It's like right above where the legs start is the bottom of the wings, and then probably about right here is where we're going to have the top of the wings starting. So I'm going to put some indication there that that's kind of where those are. Okay, let's save this again. Okay, so one of the things we could do at this point as well is kind of cut off the arms and do a copy all the way down. If we're sure that these are kind of already finalized, then that's all we really need to do. I'm going to hold off on that because there might be some more surface level detail we want to add later on. So for now, I'm going to leave that off. And let's look at adding in some other details. Okay, so I've heard that there is an insert mesh brush for dragons specifically that we might be able to use to our advantage here. So I'm gonna go take a look and see if I can find out where that is. Haven't had a lot of experience with insert mesh brushes. But we'll see. We'll see what this looks like. Okay, so we got a basic one here. Not really what I want. One just for curves, which looks very interesting, but also not what I want. This one's for toon stuff. Don't know if I'm going to be able to see it here, so maybe we need to pull that in from our light box here. So let's go brush. I'm not sure where this would be. Insert mesh. Dragon, there it is. So let's pull this in, take a look at all the stuff we got. Okay, we got vertebrae, tail, a lot of bones here. Teeth, I might take advantage of that when we need those. Some horns here, which is kind of what we're looking for at this point. It's very cool. A lot of things here. Okay, wing assembly. That might actually be really helpful for those classic wings that we're trying to build. Wow, tar skeleton, it's pretty sweet. Okay, so at the very least, we've got some things we can use to get started for these little horns. So I'm gonna take a look at what we got on the concept art and see what we need to build. And let's play with what we can use here. So I'm gonna start off not using this, and then we'll maybe switch back into this as we need to. Okay, so for now, let us append a tool. Well, first thing I'm gonna do, let's go ahead and save, and then let's just switch our subtool, or our current tool. Let's add in a base mesh to use for the horn. Okay. Use cube here. Got our X symmetry turned on. Let's look at our polyframe here. Okay, pretty low res. Let's take a look at front view. Okay, so let's just go ahead and use some Dynamesh on this. So I'm really only going to be using this for this this model here for now, and then we can always kind of work on things later. Turn off polyframe. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start by kind of getting this thing shaped like a regular horn, and on the bottom I'm going to want it to be kind of inverted a little bit, so we've got a little bit of thickness happening with the way this is shaped, but overall it's going to be kind of pulled up at the top like this, and then the sides are going to be a bit more collapsed in on itself like this. So pretty basic sculpting here. Smooth all this down. The idea with these is that they're going to be stacked on top of each other, sort of front to back on the top of the skull. So we need them to kind of position themselves so that that's possible. Okay, so we're gonna flatten this down. Okay, and there's going to be a little bit of a ridge down the front, so let's go back into clay buildup, and I want to pull this in on the side, a little bit of a raised area on top. Let's do a pinch. Okay, so let's see if we can do a custom insert here. I think what I'm going to want to do is bulge this out a little bit on the sides. So I'm going to add a little bit more clay on these outside edges. And then we're going to smooth this out. It needs to be a surface that is conducive to stacking. So I think that's going to be a little bit better for us, the way that works. And just make sure we have enough on the bottom here to kind of connect. Okay, I think for now that's probably okay. So the way that you're looking down at this horn is the way that it's going to be added to the mesh. So if you want it to be added like this is the way that you need to have your view when you create the insert mesh. So let's go down, create an insert mesh brush, make a new one, and there we go. So every subtool that we create in this, we're going to be able to use when we go back into our other mesh here. So let's save that for now as a Z tool, and then we can also jump in here and save this as is insert mesh. Okay, so let's load our concept back up here. Let's go sort of towards a 45-degree angle view here of the head. And I'm going to pick my insert mesh brush here, size this down, let's turn off X symmetry, place this on the head. So okay, it's kind of coming in at a weird angle there. That's better. Let's go to the subtools, and we can split this off. So we got that. We will let's move this into place. So the first one happens kind of right above the brow here. And sort of smaller. Try to line that up as best I can, and we'll snap our view to the side over here. And if we hold Control, drag, we can get another one. Scale that up. Okay, so got all of these in here at this point. These are all part of one subtool. So Alt click on the dragon if we want to go back to sculpting that. I'm going to merge the eye down so that those are together here. And see if we like where those are. I think overall I'm happy the way that that's looking. All right, let's reposition this a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and merge that down. And let's go ahead and see what our Dynamesh is at. Okay, Dynamesh that in. I'm gonna go set this to about 512 now. Okay. So now those are permanently part of the head. So looking at this, we can kind of play a little bit with the geometry around the horns, build that up a little bit. Before I do any of that, let's turn X symmetry back on. Okay, it looks like our symmetry is a bit off on how we inserted the subtool there. So I'm gonna go back if I can before I merge, and let's play with how that looks. And the horns. Okay. Pull those in on X symmetry until we're happy with that. And I think that's good. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it for me tonight. It's been fun hanging out with you guys and getting into this dragon sculpt, which I will be continuing for right now on Fridays, 7 to 9 p.m. And so check back with me next week, same time on this channel, and I'll be getting into hopefully some more about what's happening with this project. So until then, hope you guys have a good evening and have a great weekend.